Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, I have a bit of a weird topic. And basically this video is going to go over why I think the way that I do when it comes to Darklords. What are my thoughts? Why do I play the way that I do, and why do I deck build in particular the way that I do? The reason I'm bringing this up is because I've gotten a lot of comments specifically about, cards like Greater Polymerization, Archlord Christia, Superbia, Trade-In, Allure, a lot of these cards that most people think of are standard in Darklords that I never end up playing. And so I'm basically going to go over why I don't play these cards and what my thought process is with them. So starting off with Archlord Christia, a lot of people have asked why I don't play this card, especially when it comes to the branded stuff. Oh, you can bring it back off of first Darklord, you can bring it back off Superbia, it locks your opponent out of special summoning. There are a few reasons why I don't play this card. One, there are a myriad of outs to this card. If you do not have first Darklord up, your opponent imperms it, they play out their turn, and then you're stuck under your own Archlord Christia. It ends up being basically a worse version of Vanity's Emptiness, so it's just not really that worth it. Sure, it's on a 2800 body, and sure, it can special summon itself, but in order to set up the graveyard with exactly 4 fairies, it's a little bit more difficult than you might expect. The reason for this is because oftentimes I prioritize going for Morningstar. Being able to get Morningstar's effect to mill additional cards to the graveyard is the biggest thing that you can be doing in Darklords besides setting up first Darklord. Being able to get Morningstar's effect with another one of your Darklords on field is basically your end goal. So being able to then modulate the graveyard to have exactly 4 fairies with a Christia in hand is pretty unlikely. However, you could also bring it back off of Superbia. Now, Superbia has a when effect, meaning it misses timing. This is a massive issue because that means the only way that you're actually going to get the Superbia effect to be able to special summon out the Christia is through exactly Contact, not copying Contact, or the first Darklord. Now, that is 2 fairly common ways to get the card, but all in all, you would have to have the Superbia in the graveyard as well as the Christia, while also still having access to basically the rest of your plays prior to you even being able to do this, which is, again, inherently difficult to do. Now, granted, again, with the branded stuff, you can bring it back off of the first Darklord. So you just make the first Darklord with branded stuff. You can send the Christia to make your Mirror Jade off of an Albion. However, the thing with that is that most of the time, what I want to do is actually go for Lubellion. Lubellion is just the better of the Fallen of Alba's monsters to summon because it can be made with a Dark, which means that you can send Tragedy, which can then search up the Allure. Pretty simple, right? That's just a better option overall. So that's oftentimes what I'm going for when I'm going for Mirror Jade. Also, I meant Lubellion. Albion, on the other hand, banishes itself as well as the material needed from the graveyard, meaning that you're not getting its effect, you're not able to send it to the graveyard for something like a Mirror Jade, and if you're only running 2 of this card, sure, you could also run 3 of this card, but in an extra deck that's as tight as the one that Darklords need, running 3 copies of this seems a bit much when you could just go Lubellion instead. Also, you would still have to have access to your Archlord Christia, you'd have to have access to the first Darklord while also being able to send the Archlord Christia with the Albion to still have the materials to summon the first Darklord, get the Christia onto the field, and potentially a Mirror Jade. Sure, if you're able to set all of that up, it's incredible. Great. However, oftentimes, that is not going to be a play. You're either going to be able to go for the first Darklord, or you're going to be able to go for your Mirror Jade. You're not really going to have access to both of those, while also being able to dump a Christia into the grave. Do you see the problem with that? Christia is just a dead card. Being able to special summon it is incredibly difficult. Being able to special summon it from the grave is difficult, or the hand. It also just doesn't do anything in hand. It's just another dead card because it's not a Darklord name. You can't use it with something like Ixchel to send it to the grave. You can't send it to the grave off of Nastin. And so I hear you. Well, it's a level 8. Send it with Trade-In. Trade-In is also one of the brickiest cards that I have ever seen. Count how many level 8s there currently are in Darklords. Count them. Please. I'll show you. 1, terrible card. 2, we've discussed this one. 3, pretty good. However, you don't really want to max out on this. And 4, again, doesn't really do anything to get itself out of the hand. 4 cards, all of which are basically dead in hand. Sure, get them into the grave with trade-in. That's the whole idea. But the thing is, with 4 cards that you don't want to see in hand, unless they are specifically with trade-in that you can only play 3 copies of, if you max out on that, that's 12, 15 cards that could potentially all be dead. What? Why? Obviously, you're not going to play them in those numbers, so then trade-in becomes even more dead, and it becomes less likely to actually be useful. Why even play this? Why utilize all that extra deck space, or the deck space, in order to just potentially get an additional draw too, when you already have things like Ixchel, as well as Allure, that could potentially be used? Now, I hear what you're saying. If you are a big-time supporter of me, you know that I also don't play Allure very often. Again, similar to Trade-In, it is kind of a dead card in Darklords, but for a different reason. The reason for that is because you'd end up not wanting to banish your Darklords. You just want to avoid that in every capacity that you can, unless you're playing a lot of other Darklord cards, such as, a lot of other dark cards, such as maybe Thunder Dragons, or you're playing Alistair, or you're playing the Despia stuff. Oftentimes, having the Allure is pretty bad. Being able to banish a Darklord just for a potential neutral card advantage is pretty bad. So yeah, that's the major issue that I have with it. However, this one I am more okay with as a draw spell if you're wanting to play it. That's definitely something that you can do, and I wouldn't be against. It's just something that I personally don't like because I don't like banishing my Darklords. Now, as for other notable cards, why don't I play Zeraru? Why don't I prioritize Nurgle? Pretty simple, they don't get themselves out of the hand. They're not adding anything altogether. Amdusk gets itself out of the hand. Nastin gets itself out of the hand. Ixchel gets itself out of the hand. Indulged can be normal summoned to get itself out of the hand. Darklords inherently need to get themselves out of the hand to gain that advantage. You also need a critical mass of Darklord names specifically, which is another reason why Christia doesn't work, in order for them to actually function. Nastin needs 2 other Darklords, Ixchel needs another one, Amdusk needs another one. They all kind of need something else in order to facilitate additional plays. Plus, with things like Banishment as well as Indulged, adding additional draw cards isn't as useful because you just search them. This is something that I think a lot of people just don't think about, but yeah, Darklords just search a whole bunch of cards. They really do. Banishment being able to be searched, or be able to be used multiple times to search multiple cards, as well as Indulged being able to search. We have Condemned that's able to search, as well as we have Morningstar that just mills, which then could provide additional searches. We have Ukobak, which again mills a card. Altogether, lots of milling, lots of searching. So having additional draw cards isn't really necessary. You basically only need to see something like a Contact, as well as a way to get your monster into the grave, and then you're off to the races. As for the spells and traps, I've seen a lot of people play more heavy copies of the spells and traps, more specifically things like Enchantment and Rebellion at multiple copies. However, I oftentimes cut down on the amount of traps that I play. Either I'm playing like 1 or 2, or I'm barely playing any, basically none. And the reason for that is because all of the Darklord cards all of the Darklord traps, I should say, are terrible traps. They are awful traps, because they specifically have to send a Darklord to the grave. Send to the grave. First of all, if you are under something that prevents you from sending a card to the grave, this becomes incredibly problematic. Second of all, it gets rid of the advantage of having a Darklord on your side of the field, or in your hand. Again, a lot of these guys have good hand effects, such as Tez to protect you, or something like an on-field effect, like Nastin's being able to recur something from the grave. So all in all, getting rid of that seems pretty bad. Well, you can obviously copy the effect in the grave, but then you would have to get it into the grave. Again, with things like the Ukobak or Morningstar to mill cards, that's not really that big of a deal. You're oftentimes able to get them into the graveyard anyway. Now, as for things like Greater Polymerization, which I don't even have on here, Greater Polymerization is... Greater Polymerization is an interesting card. So basically, you're able to fusion summon out your first Darklord, which also gains the protection that it cannot be destroyed. Also, it can inflict piercing. Now, the reason I don't play this is because it is a dead card a lot of times as well. The reason for this is because you basically need to have this and 3 materials in your hand. And then the only play that you are going to be able to make is make the first Darklord. And while, yes, he is indestructible, that's nice. However, the biggest thing that is going to be able to out the first Darklord isn't something that is going to destroy you, like a Raigeki or what have you. While that does come up, it's not nearly as common as something like being able to non-target banish or just negate the effects entirely, meaning that you can just walk over it or what have you. So all in all, yeah, being indestructible is nice, but it's not really worth it to have another dead card. There are already so many cards that are just dead cards inherently in Darklords. You don't really want to see Superbia in your hand unless you can discard it off of an Ix-Shell. You really don't want to see something like a Zerato in your hand unless you can discard it off of an Ix-Shell. You really don't want to see Nurgle unless you can discard it. You don't really want to see Morningstar unless you already have full combo. You really don't want to see something like your Ukobak in your hand unless you have it in the same hand with Amdusk, so you can normal summon that and get off to the races with your Amdusk. There are a lot of things that only come up in specific situations that really do slow down the Darklords, and cutting those down means that you're going to be more consistent. Consistency is king when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! You want to get your plays out as often as possible. Now, granted, this doesn't mean cutting out power cards, but it does mean that cutting out cards that are going to only work 1 out of every 30 duels may be a good idea. And Christia, Zerato, the like, all seem to fit in that same category. Even things like Traden. Now, when it comes to something like Capricious as the target for Indulged, this is something I don't do. A lot of people are confused as to why I don't do this, and the simple reason is it's another card that doesn't really do anything. You don't really want to normal summon it, you want to summon the Indulged. You don't really want to use it for anything other than, I guess, summoning out the Morningstar, which would only be able to be used... I guess you could use it on your turn. You can also use it on your opponent's turn to summon out the Morningstar. But in all reality, the main reason to use this card is for that tribute effect. Now, granted, if you're giving it to your opponent, you're probably not going to be able to do that, because you're going to go first most of the time. I wouldn't understand why you would want to go second with Darklords, but if you happen to go second, sure, you could potentially give this to your opponent. Realistically, your Indulged is probably going to be negated or stopped in some capacity, and that Capricious, again, isn't really going to go back to you. Maybe you walk over it and decrease the attack and defense of your opponent's monsters, but again, it's all of these things that are very situational, not really going to happen all that often. And yes, you could technically use Capricious to get out a Morningstar at quick effect speed on the opponent's turn, which could then potentially special summon more monsters, but again, it's a theoretical. I don't hate this one as much as a lot of the other options that people tend to throw my way, but I do understand, I do understand why it's played, but I don't necessarily like it. I think that just going for the Ukobak to potentially bring that back because it provides so much more value is a little bit better. This one only really works with Morningstar. It's not really worth using for, normal summoning Ix-Shell during your opponent's turn. It's like, yeah, sure, if you have a Trap Engrave, maybe it does something, but realistically, it probably doesn't. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is Reasoning. This is a card that I have used extensively and that some of you guys have actually told me about back when I first started playing Darklords. And this card is absolutely invaluable. There's a reason it's currently limited to 1 in the TCG, and that is because it's insane. Basically, this allows you to freely summon out one of your Darklords, unless you are unlucky like me and always hit Morningstar. There are so many different levels within the Darklord sphere. As you can see, 6, 7, 8, lots of 8s, 9, 10, and the 11s, and then of course the 4s and the 3s. This means that it is very difficult for your opponent to actually call a number that will actually show up. You get the free special summon, and then you are able to potentially normal summon another monster or special summon something else out from the extra deck or, from the Grave or what have you in order to go into Condemned. This is very, very useful overall, just allowing you to gain that additional advantage, while also potentially milling some of your spells and traps, which again, you mostly want to have in Grave, besides like Banishment and Contact. So, all in all, those are my thoughts. Also, I highly value Tez. Tez is incredibly important, and it's definitely something to utilize as much as you can. Just having it in hand, or being able to have it searchable, is very useful. Protects you from things like Lightning Storm and the like. All in all, though, those are my thoughts on Darklords and why I play the way that I do, and why specifically I deck build the way that I do. So, hopefully you guys did indeed enjoy, and this gave you something to think about. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.